So now that Thanksgiving is over, we are turning our attention to Christmas. It's pretty obvious here with the decorations and so forth. And when we think about Christmas Day, which is just a few weeks away, there's a lot of preparation that typically takes place this time of year. We spend this time leading up to Christmas preparing family gatherings, scheduling them, decorating the tree, hanging up lights outside, making food for those gatherings, preparing by purchasing gifts maybe for other people to exchange. And it's that last one, gifts, that is what I'd like to focus on today. Gift buying and gift giving is a very significant part of our society. And we all know that retailers rely on the Christmas shopping season for a large portion of their earnings as well. And who doesn't like to receive a gift? I think we all do. God gives us many gifts, many of which we probably don't even realize when He's doing it. There's many people out there in the world who do not recognize God. Some don't know Him by His name, yet they still receive gifts from God. There's a theological term for it called common grace. It's common for everybody. Things like just being given breath in your lungs every day to live. That is grace by God. He didn't have to do that. And He does that for anybody who's alive, whether you believe in Jesus or you don't. And so these gifts are extended to everybody, regardless of your beliefs. And gifts are never earned. Otherwise, we wouldn't call them gifts. We'd call them earnings or wages or something like that. So this morning we're going to go way back to the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, look at something that King Solomon wrote about 3,000 years ago. And it's something that Solomon tells us is the gift of God. And we'll see how that points towards Jesus and His birth. So we'll get to the Bible at this time and read those few verses. If you're following in your Pew Bible, it's on 473. And while you're turning there, if you are a fan of the oldies music from like the 1960s and 70s and so forth, you may remember a song called Turn, 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 recorded by the Byrds. It was a big hit back then. And that song was mostly taken from this chapter, Ecclesiastes 3. And I found it interesting that the man who wrote the song, he donated much of the proceeds from the song to various charitable organizations, but he did say he was going to keep 5% for himself because he says he did write one word that is repeated 3 times, so he thought that was worth something. The turn, turn, turn. But so we're not going to look at the lyrics to that song. This is what immediately follows that, actually on 473 in your Pew Bible. So reading from verse 9 through 14, the word of the Lord says, "What does the worker gain from his toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on men. He has made everything beautiful in His time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for men than to be happy and do good while they live, that everyone may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all his toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere Him." May the Lord's blessing be added to the reading and hearing of His holy word. So I'd like to focus primarily on verse 12, at least to start this morning. This really took me by surprise whenever I was researching this, because I think if you ask the typical Christian or even the typical Jewish believer out there who follows the Old Testament, and you ask them, what is the best thing in the world? I don't know that many people would say what Solomon says here. They'd probably say something like salvation and things like that, and love, those kind of things which are good. But Solomon says, I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. So the question is, what does this mean? What does this encompass? And it means many things. First of all, it means that God cares about our happiness. Some people focus on heaven so much before they get there that they really don't enjoy the time that they have on earth. So that is that's a little discouraging, actually. There's a saying out there that some people can be so heavenly minded they are of no earthly good. So another thing is this shows us that God cares about what we do with the time he's given us here on earth. He's given us this time for a reason, so that we can be productive and also enjoy life while we are at it. Not just sit back and wait until either we die and go to be with God, or he takes us in the rapture, or whatever the case might be. Now, Jesus is on every single page of the Bible. May not be in name, but the contents of the Bible either point towards his coming, or they tell about him, or they reflect on Jesus in one way, shape, or form. So Jesus, therefore, is in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And Jesus did something that is so important for us, and that is he lived his life in a way that teaches us how to be happy and how to do good. And I think of it this way, that Jesus lived his life under the cloud of the crucifixion. He knew what was going to happen to him. He knew that that was his purpose, and that was his destiny, to suffer this horrendous death for something that he didn't even do. And if I were you, or if that were me, do you think that a day would go by where you wouldn't think about you're one day closer to that? And living under that cloud, how do you think you could experience true joy, knowing that's what you have to look forward to? Well, that's the way that Jesus lived. So how do you think he could focus on serving people in the meantime and doing good for other people? It would certainly be hard to do, but Jesus shows us that it can be done, and he did it. So he serves as an example for us to do the same thing, even though we are dealing with a variety of clouds most likely hanging over our heads right now. Hopefully not fear of a terrible death like he did, but clouds nonetheless. It should go without saying, Christmas is by far my favorite day of the year. Certainly is. I mean, I know that the symbolism of Easter, and it's more important in a sense, but for me, nothing beats Christmas, though. I mean, you have family together. Hopefully everybody is happy. Things are decorated. It's just a different day from the rest of the year. And I think it's easy for us to be happy because it gives us a reprieve from, the normal routine of the other days. Not so much this year because it's on a Saturday, but if it's on a weekday, hopefully you're not going to work. Now, I know there are people, nurses and doctors and so forth, but typically it is different from the normal day. But do we realize that there's many Christians out there in the world who can't experience a joyful Christmas like we can? And I say that because they're the ones who have to practice their faith in the shadows, as they say, because maybe they know that they'll be targeted if anybody finds out that they are a Christian believer. So imagine waking up on Christmas morning and going to work like any other day. Nothing else is different where you're at. Imagine maybe you're the only person who works at the place that you do, who even knows that there are Christians somewhere celebrating a holiday today. And maybe you're living in an area where there's so few people where they don't even realize what a Christian is. They never heard the name of Jesus, and you're one of those few who have. I'm reminded of our unreached people groups that I'm putting in the bulletin now from here out. Buddhist in Japan, there's over 120 million of them Maybe you're among that 0.3% who's actually an evangelical Christian, and you realize that there's a day when people celebrate the birth of Jesus, whom you worship and so forth. But maybe you just don't feel that it's safe to let anybody know your faith and so forth. Maybe you know that you'll be harassed if people know that you celebrate Christmas, and you're one of those people. And maybe nobody's going to want to do business with you as a result. Even so, if you're in that kind of a situation where that dark cloud is really hanging over you, those people can still be happy on Christmas Day because Jesus is with them, in spirit, of course. The joy of Christmas can change your whole perspective. Now, I realize that oftentimes when I'm standing up here and preaching, I'm talking to several people who are retired. Hopefully you're living the dream now. Everything is good for you. But when Solomon talks about our toil and our work, okay, he's talking about any kind of work. We don't want to restrict and limit that to a job that you go to that gives you a paycheck in return. So there is, like I said, work that you get paid to do, and then there's a lot of work we know that we don't get paid to do. I go to my job where I get paid in a day, and then I come home and then I do work that I don't get paid to do. Where doing the dishes, doing the laundry, whatever case that is. For some people, maybe it's something like gardening. I know there's some gardeners here, for example. Gardening is hard work, which is why I don't do it. But I can appreciate people who are good at it and can have a very nice looking garden and the bright colors and all that. Very nice. And you can take pride in a job well done because you planted and raised a beautiful garden. Or maybe it's quilting or cooking or, you name it. So many different things out there. Maybe you could even volunteer your work at soup kitchen, a food bank, church, whatever the case is. There's plenty of work to do out there for us, and the Bible tells us that a gift from God is taking satisfaction in a job well done. There's an interesting word study that's actually going on in Ecclesiastes 3 here that we aren't typically aware of because we don't know the original language, but it shines a light on this gift that Solomon talks about. So in verse 13, he says it is the gift of God, and when you go back to the word that they translate as gift, you'd find that there's actually two words in the original language that could be translated as gift. The one, and I don't know if I'm good with the pronunciation or not, is mincha, which appears over 200 times in the Old Testament. It's a very popular word, and it gives us the idea of an offering or a gift to God. So offerings are always from man to God. God never makes offerings to us. There's no reason to do that. So that's one. That's the more popular one. But the other word for gift appears 6 times in the Old Testament, not 200, and it's matoth. And that is the idea of a gift or a reward. So like mincha, there is a gift given from man to God, but can also, this matoth is, Solomon is the only one who, in the whole Bible, who applies this word to God. And he says that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God, or the matoth of God. And interestingly, 2 chapters later, Solomon pulls out that same word again, and he says, moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is the gift of God. He says that again. So we've all been taught that we should not focus on material things of the world because, eternity's with God and we can't take these things with us, those kind of things. But life shouldn't, and of course life shouldn't revolve around material things, but according to Solomon, there's nothing wrong with doing these things like just eating and drinking and finding satisfaction in your work and enjoying the possessions that God has allowed you to have. The enemy is the one who tries to take that joy away from us, and he tries to lie to us about it, saying, no, you're bad if you enjoy that because, God doesn't want you to do that. Well, that's not true. Solomon's pretty clear about that. The enemy's telling us that it's a sin, but we should actually be thankful to God because he created these things for us to enjoy, because he loves us so much. And so the greatest gift that God has ever given us is a gift that most people don't even enjoy, and that gift is Jesus. Hence the season that we are now celebrating. And sadly, I think the enemy has largely been successful in blinding the world to the goodness of Jesus. Just look at our country. There was a time when the Ten Commandments would be displayed in the courthouse and in the public square, but much of that's been done away with. Now, we still print "In God We Trust" on our coins, but really, would anybody mistake us for a nation that is humbly indebted to God? Probably not. And it's a result of the constant efforts by the enemy to remove Jesus and to remove that idea from the consciousness of society. And it shouldn't surprise us at all. For instance, when Mary was pregnant with Jesus, she and Joseph arrived just in the nick of time in Bethlehem to give birth. You can be sure that the enemy was doing everything that he could to try to destroy Jesus during the birth, when no one found it in their hearts to take in this young pregnant girl, thus denying her proper medical care. And just think of how the medicine was very, wasn't very advanced back then. If you had a trained doctor, you could still suffer from infection and blood loss and those kind of things. Well, she had to give birth to Jesus with no help that we know of. And it was in the providence of God that Jesus was born live and healthy. I'm sure that the enemy was not happy that Jesus was born, but all he did was just moved on to the next plan of attack. So within 2 years, the enemy inspired King Herod to issue the decree to kill all baby boys under 2 years old in an effort to kill Jesus as well. And he was unsuccessful, as God used the angel to deliver another message to Joseph, told him pick up in the middle of the night and head to Egypt because they're trying to kill Jesus. And so he was obedient, and he packed up and took Mary and Jesus, and they left. That was just the beginning. I mean, there were times in Jesus' adult ministry where crowds got upset at what he was teaching and were left wondering if they would have attacked him. Some verses suggest that they were that angry with him if he had not been able to make a quick escape and get out of there. To this day, the enemy still tries to remove Jesus some way, somehow, from our consciousness, because he knows that Jesus gives us so many things, but something that we might not give him credit for is just giving us enjoyment in life. And Christmas is a time of year when we should be thinking about Jesus more so than the rest of the year and how God gave him to us. But the enemy does what he does. He tries to remove him from our focus. And people don't attend church around Christmas time like they used to. You might find a few more faces pop up on, Christmas, week of Christmas or something like that. But even when you're at home, you turn on TV, you watch a Hallmark movie or something like that. How many of them mention Jesus at all? Not very many, if at all. Even the cartoons, not much of a mention anymore. People do still associate love and coming together with Christmas, and these are good things. But the sad thing is they have stripped Christmas of what causes that love and what causes that coming together, and it is Jesus. And I'm not saying at all that it's unchristian to enjoy any of those movies. I, as a tradition, watch many of the same shows every year. But I'm just telling you that the enemy has very subtle ways to accomplish his goals. Remove just a little bit of Jesus over here, take a little more over there, and it's like the old analogy of the frog in the pot of water. When you turn the heat up slowly, he will cook himself to death and not jump out, as opposed to throwing him into a boiling pot of water. And it's much the same thing that has happened over 2,000 years in regards to Jesus, and much less than that in the history of our own country here. But the gift of God, as Solomon says, is enjoying life. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Jesus is on every single page of the Bible. And Ecclesiastes 3 is no different in that regard. So focusing on verses 12 and 13 again, there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. And to use that original word again, you could say this is the matoth of God. And what is the ultimate gift or matoth of God? Well, it's the one that God sent on a mission to earth to be an example for us, and also, more than that, a suitable sacrifice to atone for our sins. That is Jesus, the one called the Christ. During this season, you may be deciding what you're going to buy for that special someone, but I urge you, don't let the stress of the season detract from the great enjoyment that we should have, thinking of the life that God has given us and all the opportunities that we have to influence people for his good. And while you're considering what you're going to buy, just don't lose sight of the fact that God is offering to you a gift every single day as well. It's a very unique gift of joy, enjoyment, and happiness. And maybe you're here today and you're thinking, okay, the church looks really nice, and Thanksgiving's over, now I'm going to focus on Christmas, but I'm really not happy inside. And that's not uncommon. Or maybe if you're here and if you're being completely honest with yourself, you'd admit that maybe you're not doing as much good in the world as you think you could, and as you feel God sort of urging you and pushing you in a direction, but you're just not sure how, or maybe just other things come up. There's always something that's going to come up in the way of doing the will of God. The fact is, all that can change if you just ask Jesus and ask God, and he can help you with that. Ask somebody who is a faithful believer too. Ask them to pray for you. You can do any of these kind of things. Jesus, though, is the key. He is that gift. And Christmas Day is when we celebrate God sending him to us to show us the way to true happiness and to true goodness. Jesus is available for anyone. All that we have to do is just accept that gift. This is my hope and prayer for everyone here this Advent season, that you will accept the gift and enjoy life to its fullest, the way that God intended. And I just want to close out with some words from Solomon, who is known by many to be the wisest man of the whole Old Testament. Words that we should all keep with us during Advent and beyond. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. Let us close with a word of prayer.